Welcome to Doctors on Call. I'm Jenna Miller. Cough, fever, fatigue, and difficulty breathing. These are the most common symptoms a person may experience with COVID-19, also known as the coronavirus. But anxiety, fear, loneliness, and stress are symptoms that a majority are feeling even if they don't actually have the virus. Mental health disorders, including anxiety and depression, can worsen during this time. Today on Doctors on Call, we'll tackle some of those hard-to-ask questions regarding mental health with our guests, Bales and Beth from High Plains Mental Health Center.
Presentation of Doctors on Call on Smoky Hills PBS is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Gove County Medical Center in Quinter, healing through caring. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, we're committed to being a healthcare partner you can turn to. That's why we're simplifying the health insurance experience so you can feel more empowered in your health.
Russell Regional Hospital, experts, neighbors, friends.
Welcome back to Doctors on Call. Tonight we're discussing mental health, families, and the effect the coronavirus is having on both. Beth Christians is a graduate of Sterling College in Kansas and Bethel University in Minnesota with a license in marriage and family therapy. Beth has specialized in adoption and foster care as well as trauma and attachment work. She currently works with children and families dealing with trauma, depression, anxiety, and ADHD out of the Osborne High Plains Mental Health Center office. Bales is a graduate of Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, and the University of Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She has a degree in clinical psychology. She has been employed by High Plains Mental Health Center for 20 years and sees a variety of age groups. Give us a call at 800-337-4788 toll-free with your medical questions about mental health on Doctors on Call. Our show brings you information which may be useful to you when you visit your own physician or therapist. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes.
We have a lot of important things to discuss, I think. First of all, life as we know it right now has changed. What advice do you have to help individuals cope with those changes right now?
We put our ideas into 4 different R words, and they are relationships, routines, relaxation, and resilience. And with relationships, it's very important to maintain connections right now, even if they're virtual. With routines, we know that most people are out of their normal routines, but things like when you wake up, when you go to bed, when you eat, when you shower, these things are important. Many people are based out of their home, and it's important also to have a designated place where you're working or doing schoolwork.
Just for concentration purposes, we know a lot of people have noticed just the amount of multitasking that they're having to do more of with all of this going on. They're being the cook, the maid, the school teacher, the worker and whatever. And so we just want to encourage people to really try to focus on one of those tasks at a time, taking it sometimes minute by minute or hour by hour, to just kind of manage all of the tasks that they're taking on extra in one day.
And with relaxation and self-care, that's where your coping skills come in. And there's a lot of great information out there right now from different websites like Mayo Clinic, NAMI, that has lots of suggestions. And some of those are having a self-care menu, things that you can do for yourself that will bring you peace and relaxation, limiting conversations and exposure to the news. The suggestions that we continue to hear are that you need to check in with reliable sources a couple of times a day, but not to be listening to the news or your anxiety will go up.
Excellent.
And especially in terms of supporting your children's mental health too, to make sure that they're not overhearing a lot of conversations, they're not overhearing a lot of the news, because they tend to maybe listen in when you don't realize it and then have a lot of questions, and we may not realize that it's bothering them as much as we think it is.
Sure. What are some appropriate conversations you can have, whether your children are very little, you've got, middle school age children, or even your teenagers? What are some appropriate conversations?
Sure. Some of the signs to watch for with kids, if they are becoming kind of anxious about this, is you might see them complaining of stomach aches, headaches. They might we might see more behavioral issues in them where they're more defiant, not wanting to do chores and tasks, when really if we look underneath those behaviors, what we see is probably some anxiety happening. And so we can kind of sit back and say, hey, what's going on? You know, I noticed you didn't want to do this task, or you were frustrated. Are you worried about something? And then talking with them in age-appropriate ways about what the coronavirus is. There's a lot of great websites out there that Mayo Clinic is one, Conscious Discipline is another that gives some storybooks that parents can print off and read to their children and just appropriately explain what the virus is and how to keep us safe. And safety is probably the number one factor. If we can talk to kids about all of the things we're doing, like wearing masks and, you know, staying away from our friends right now and not going to school, those are things that are keeping us safe. So to really talk about the safety aspect instead of the feeling scared aspect.
Robin, you had mentioned earlier about keeping the relationships, how important that is. Is there a difference between, so we keep hearing the social distancing, but is there a difference between social distancing and emotional distancing?
Definitely. And right now we're having to use our virtual approaches, and we're very fortunate that we have a lot of ways that we can communicate that don't cost money. But the emotional connections, we need at least a few people that we can talk to very candidly about how we're doing emotionally.
How important is it to stay not just mentally healthy, but also physically healthy? Do those work hand in hand?
We've been talking a lot with our clients about getting outside at least 30 minutes a day, get fresh air and sunshine. We were reading some articles earlier this month that talked about your mental health will improve sometimes by 20 or 30% just for that 30 minutes of getting outside with fresh air. So to keep doing that, and that is something that we're encouraging a lot of kids and families to do together. If they're, you know, still staying at home together, they can still get out, ride their bikes, and do some of those outdoor activities.
And we're fortunate to be, a lot of this area has space where they can go and be safe. And we know in a lot of cities that's not possible right now.
Absolutely. So even though most of the country is on a stay-at-home order, it's still important to actually not just be in the home, get outside. Absolutely. There's also a lot of fear that's associated with this pandemic right now. So how can a person turn that fear into something positive?
And that's where the fourth R that we were going to discuss today comes in, and that's resilience. And resilience is the ability to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity and stress. And that comes with a lot of how we think about things and what we focus on. And I brought just kind of a funny little visual that I have, and it's your brain lifting weights, and it says train your brain. And that to me signifies that we have to be very intentional about what we're thinking about, and what, just like with the news, what we're watching, and we can look for meaning in this difficult time. I have heard it said there are unexpected gifts that are coming out of this time.
Absolutely. Something else that's happened is everyone's schedules have been turned upside down. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but maybe we need to talk a little bit deeper into, should families come up with a schedule and stick to it? How important is that?
Well, if you think about, most of our kiddos have been in a very structured environment for the last 6 months with teachers. I mean, down to the minute sometimes of when lunch happens and when PE time happens. You know, they're used to a bell telling them it's time to switch classes. And so we really encourage parents not to have to necessarily have it down to the minute, but to give kind of a basic schedule of, you know, we're all going to get up about this time. We're all going to eat breakfast around this time. We're all going to work on schoolwork around this time, so it's quiet, so there's less distractions. We're going to figure out the times of the day that our brains are working the best for schoolwork, the times that our brains need a break and maybe run outside, and sometimes for connection. So like Robin said, really work on some of those relationships too. We've encouraged a lot of our clientele to really schedule in their day a time where they're reaching out to one other person, or you know, if it's teenagers or some of our middle school kids, that they're getting together with their friends on Zoom, doing, you know, they do the virtual school meetings on Zoom with their classmates, but sometimes just that unstructured get together on Zoom can be helpful to keep those connections alive during this time.
Because that's part of their development in junior high and high school is friends and relationships, and they're missing that.
Absolutely. What suggestions can you share to help families successfully separate their work life from the school life to their family life? How do they separate that?
And that has a lot to do with what we were talking about with the schedule, about designating, and even designating a place where you're working, a place where the student is going to do their schoolwork rather than moving that around. And with school, a lot of that, I've heard recommendations of trying to make your child's schedule as close as you can to what they were accustomed to. So if they went to PE at 9 o'clock, that might be a time you do something active or go outside.
And we've really encouraged parents, especially to, for working parents, this has been challenging for a lot of us, us included, is figuring out where's our workspace, where's our play space with our kids, where do we make sure that we have uninterrupted time. I've heard a lot of families getting very creative about the amount of time that they're working and then taking a break to do kid schoolwork and then taking a break to do family meal time. It's taken some creativity, but I think there's a lot of families that have been able to collaborate and offer that. You see a lot of social media posts of people giving great ideas.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to go to the phone lines now. We've got a caller from Colby. This is Sarah on the line. Hi, Sarah. You are live on the air. What is your question for our guest tonight?
Hi. I have a loved one that has been suffering, kind of withdrawing themselves from their family and just haven't seemed completely up to par and mental-wise. And then with the COVID-19, it just kind of seems to have gotten worse. But they don't see it. They won't accept help, even though, we've kind of tried to give that idea. Do you have any suggestions for what we should do to help this individual?
Well, it's great that you're recognizing that there's a change. And, if they're not open to the idea of therapy or working with their doctor, we've seen a lot of neat things on the NAMI site, which is NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, that had indirect ways someone could seek help, like warm lines or text lines or things that you wouldn't have to go anywhere or talk to someone that you knew.
And Sarah, another option that we have locally, we partnered with some agencies and some organizations in the area to do 7 cups. And I'll kind of put it up here so you can see it. It's a free website, www.7cups.com. And your loved one or you or both can sign up for a free, we call it kind of a Pinterest for mental health. It gives articles, videos, it helps you kind of check in on your sleep schedule. There's a lot of great options. And so if someone's not ready to join into the therapy option, they can at least start here, and it sometimes doesn't feel as intimidating.
Wonderful advice. What are some of the psychological effects that are associated with quarantining?
I think what we've seen for a lot of people that we've talked to is kind of getting in that cycle of negative thinking. So those thoughts of, I'm stuck at home, I can't do anything, instead of thinking, we call it flipping the thought, I'm safe at home. I can't go out with my friends, but I can do some hobbies that I haven't enjoyed in a while, or I can pick up some books I haven't been able to read in a while, or I can connect with my kids during this time. And so it's really thinking about people kind of shifting some of their thoughts, because I think that's what we're noticing the most, is that kind of spiral of thought of, what do I do? I'm alone.
And this is another visual that we use sometimes, and it's the circle of control in the middle and the circle of no control. And we actually had a resource and wrote down some of the things that we have control over still. And those are our attitude, how much we watch the news, our own safety and social distancing, keeping connections going, finding fun things to do, and how we treat others.
Excellent. Wonderful. can all the worry and stress that people are dealing with right now, obviously it's not good mentally for a person, but can it also negatively affect a person's physical health?
Sure. We do see anxiety show itself in stomach aches, headaches. One of the main factors we see in a lot of people that first come to us with anxiety is insomnia. They don't sleep. Sometimes they'll have very difficult sleep. They might fall asleep, but they can't stay asleep. So any changes in eating, sleeping patterns, we see a lot of that when there's anxiety present.
Is it true that helping others can help boost your mental health?
Absolutely. And that's probably one of the positives most coming out of this is we're seeing people step up in really creative ways to try to encourage others. One of my friends just told me that she was writing letters to someone in her church that's not on technology.
Absolutely. That's letter writing is great right now. What are some of the other ways that we can do that? Because we obviously, I hear of people delivering groceries and putting it on the doorstep. Is there any other ideas you have to help, especially even the elderly who just can't get out?
I've been really encouraged in our communities that the nursing homes, because they're not allowed to have visitors right now, they actually had a movement where they had a bunch of the local kids who obviously weren't in school during the day, show up and on the outsides of the windows painted on the nursing home windows to bring color and decoration right around springtime. And it was a way for them to interact with those people on the other side of the window. Everybody was safe, but it was just a way for those kids to learn how to serve others, but also, help that elderly population kind of brighten their day.
Smith Center, the fire department delivered eggs and things from the Easter Bunny to their homes. They went around.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Great time of the year to do that. We want to remind our viewers that we are talking about mental health and how that is affecting people, how the coronavirus is affecting families and individuals with our therapists, Robin Bales and Beth Christians from Osborne High Plains Mental Health Center. Give us a call at 800-337-4788 if you have a question to ask them. Let's talk about, we know the liquor stores are all open right now, but can turning to alcohol during this time be dangerous?
Definitely. And one of the ways we think about that is self-medicating. When your emotions are negative, but you turn to things that are ultimately going to hurt you and may make your emotions even worse.
Yeah, what most people don't realize about alcohol is it's actually a depressant. So if you're already anxious and depressed, the alcohol actually will make it worse over time and in that moment. So, we really encourage people to look at activities and coping skills that are going to help boost the good feeling chemicals in their brains. Exercise being one of them, sleep, reaching out, talking to a friend, playing games with the kids, something that's going to create laughter. We've encouraged a lot of people to, get a fun movie or, pull out some of your comedy shows that you haven't watched in a long time just to get yourself to laugh, because those will create those feel-good chemicals in the brain and, improve that long-term resilience.
And we've been sharing just list of screen-free activity, family activities.
Absolutely. Maybe pull out some of those old home videos that
Yes.
we haven't watched for a while. When might a person actually need to seek help professionally for their mental health?
Well, I think our caller before kind of mentioned too, just when we start to notice those changes either in ourselves or our loved ones, and sometimes it is where we're going to see it in somebody else. And so being open to someone's feedback, if they recognize that we're not sleeping so great, we're not eating, we're not getting enjoyment out of the things we used to enjoy, if we're not reaching out, if we've gotten quieter,
when our daily routines get interrupted. And we think about functioning. How are you doing with work? How are you doing with family? How are you doing even in something like hobbies? And when we see a real change in functioning, then that's when we start to think they may need outside help.
And how can a person do that right now during all the stay-at-home orders?
Sure. Well, thankfully, with technology, we are still able to provide all of the services that we've currently provided in the past. They look a little bit differently because some of them are by phone or by televideo, but we do have all of our services. So what someone would do would be to call our office in Hayes or one of our branch offices and say, I'm needing some therapy or some medications, would like to get into services with you. and then our receptionist and our team will work with that person to walk them through the process of getting an entry and getting assigned to a therapist.
And how does a person find a therapist that best suits them?
In our entry process, sometimes people will say, I prefer a female, I prefer a male. They can, if they have any things they're really looking for, they can designate that.
And we often on the show talk about a second opinion. If somebody chooses a therapist that maybe they don't just jive with, how do they go about maybe seeking out somebody else?
We usually talk to our clients when they first see us. We say, you know, let's meet a couple times, and if after those couple sessions you don't really feel like I'm a good fit for you, we certainly have other people in this office or in other offices that can serve you. So that is the advantage of us covering the 20 counties that we do. We have lots of outreach and staff that we can meet your needs.
What advice do you have for those individuals who might have already struggled with mental health issues before this has all happened, and you don't want them sinking deeper into a bad spot?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately for some people that's happening right now. And we are encouraging people to use the coping skills and using these 4 R's that we talked about just on a daily basis. The relationships, the resilience, the routines, and then relaxation and self-care.
We've really encouraged people to reach out more often to their therapist or their case managers. We have the Schwaller Center in Hayes offers kind of a short-term respite for adults 18 and over if they would need just a break from some of that. So we do have some additional services that if people are needing a little more of a step up of care, we have those available, and they just need to contact our office if they're clients already.
And even our Facebook page has put some really neat articles up, and what Beth was talking earlier about flipping a thought. Some of the common thoughts and fears right now, and finding an alternative way to look at that.
Excellent. At what point should a person potentially seek help through medication?
And that's something that we talk with our clients about regularly, about if that's a good fit or not. Some people will come to us from their doctor's referral, and so then it's kind of an immediate concern. But a lot of times in therapy we'll look at, is therapy helping? Are you getting the maximum benefit? A lot of times what we know is therapy and medications together usually create the best outcome. Just statistically we've seen that. So.
And unfortunately, sometimes there's a negative stigma attached to a person needing mental health. We need to change that, I believe. What can you tell that person that might think, I need help, or a family that thinks they might need help, but maybe I'm too embarrassed, or, you know, how do we flip that thought?
Well, I think we've come a long way, and I think Kansas is somewhat progressive in our mental health and our thoughts about that. I think once people get in the door for therapy, they have a really good reaction, like, why didn't I do this sooner? I remember I went to counseling in college, I think my junior year, and I thought, why didn't I do this my freshman year? This is really helpful.
Yeah.
And we are somewhat of coaches in a way for our clients, coaching them to their best life. And most people have some goals or some areas where they feel like, I wish this was a little different. I wish this was a little better.
And a lot of times I talk to some of the teenagers and kids that I see, and I say, you may not realize it because obviously we have to abide by confidentiality. There's a lot more people that utilize our services than you realize. You know, if you think you think you're the only one out of your class that might be coming to get services, but you don't know that for sure. And there's more people than you realize. So helping them just normalize that.
We hear the word depressed or depression used a lot, especially now. When is a person considered truly depressed and they really need some help?
Criteria.
We have 9 different criteria that we look at, and they have to meet 5 of those, and they have to meet it for a certain time period. And then there's also different levels of depression. There's major depression, and then there's dysthymia, which is more of a minor depression.
And a lot of times during the evaluation process, when people first meet with our therapist staff, we'll go through a series of evaluations and questions that'll help us figure out what level of depression they might have, or anxiety.
And what's the difference between depression and anxiety?
What we see for most people with depression is just low mood, feeling sad. Sometimes it can look like irritability, tiredness, and fatigue. What we notice in anxiety, some of that can be crossover, but it is also just not being able to stop worry, worrying about various subjects and can't seem to control that worry on a regular basis.
And it can turn into physical, their heart beating fast or sweating, or it can turn into a lot of physical symptoms. And a lot of people do end up in emergency rooms because they are fearful that they're having a heart attack, and sometimes that's anxiety.
Okay, we have just a few seconds left. Let's recap what those 4 R's are one
Sure.
more time, Robin.
Relationships, staying connected, routines, relaxation and self-care, and resilience.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for being on our show tonight. That's Robin Bales and Beth Christians from Osborne High Plains Mental Health Center. On our next Doctors on Call, we'll be discussing cardiology with Dr. David Batten from the Maury Clinic. You can email questions for our next program. That address is doctors@shptv.org. Thank you for joining us for Doctors on Call. I'm Jenna Miller.
Presentation of Doctors on Call on Smoky Hills PBS is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Gove County Medical Center in Quinter, healing through caring. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, we're committed to being a healthcare partner you can turn to. That's why we're simplifying the health insurance experience so you can feel more empowered in your health.
Russell Regional Hospital, experts, neighbors, friends.